Have you ever really wondered what's actually going on inside your head when you meditate? I mean, for thousands of years, it's been this practice kind of shrouded in mystery. But today, we've got neuroscientists who are literally mapping this inner world. And what they're finding is absolutely fascinating. It turns out meditation isn't just about feeling a little calmer, it's about physically, tangibly rewiring your brain. You know, for the longest time, the scientific study of meditation was in a pretty similar spot. Total chaos. Researchers had this one massive problem. There are hundreds of different practices, and they're all just called meditation. It was like trying to study animals without knowing the difference between a fish and a bird. There was just no common language, no clear way to classify what they were even looking at. So what did they do? How did they get past that roadblock? Well, to even begin to understand the effects, they first had to get really specific. They had to define their terms and run controlled experiments to see what, if anything, was actually changing. And let me tell you, the journey to answer that simple question has revealed some incredible things about the human mind. Okay, so the first real wave of solid evidence came from looking at the psychological side of things. When researchers started to compare people who meditate regularly with people who don't, they started seeing these incredibly consistent patterns pop up again and again. And what's so interesting here is just how wide-ranging these connections are. Early studies, the kind that take a snapshot in time, consistently linked a regular mindfulness practice to higher levels of all the good stuff. Life satisfaction, optimism, self-esteem, and at the same time, they saw lower levels of things like depression and anxiety, and especially lower levels of what psychologists call rumination. That's when you get stuck in those negative thought loops, just playing them over and over in your head. And look, this wasn't just stuff for academic papers. These findings had huge real-world consequences. Back in 1979, a guy named John Kabat-Zinn at the University of Massachusetts Medical School took all this emerging research and built a structured 8-week program. He called it mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, and it was originally designed to help patients who were dealing with chronic pain. It was a total game changer, one of the first programs to take meditation out of the monastery and bring it right into a clinical setting. Okay, so we can see the psychological benefits, right? But the big question is how? How is this actually happening? What is physically changing in our brains? This is where things get really, really cool, because modern technology like fMRI scanners gives us this incredible window to peek inside the meditating mind. First up, let's talk about the amygdala. Think of it as your brain's emotional alarm system, the part that screams, danger! Well, some really groundbreaking research from Harvard neuroscientist Sarah Lazar found that after just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice, the actual gray matter in the amygdala got smaller. Now, that doesn't mean you stop feeling things. It just means you're less likely to get completely hijacked by your emotions. Your brain's alarm bell just becomes a little less jumpy, so you don't get stuck in that panicked fight or flight mode. All right, next up is the prefrontal cortex. If the amygdala is the alarm system, the prefrontal cortex is the CEO of your brain. It's the part in charge of smart decisions, impulse control, and keeping your emotions in check. What meditation does is act like a workout for this region. It strengthens its connection to that emotional amygdala. And that, right there, is the difference between reacting and responding. Instead of just snapping back at someone, you suddenly have this little bit of space to pause and choose a better way forward. And then there's the default mode network, or DMN for short. We all know this one. This is your wandering mind. It's the network that lights up when you're just spacing out, daydreaming, thinking about yourself, worrying about the future, replaying the past. Well, studies show that meditation helps to quiet this network down. It helps turn down the volume on that internal chatter that so often fuels our anxiety. Okay, so we've established that meditation literally changes the brain. But, and this is a big but, it's not a one-size-fits-all deal. It turns out different meditation techniques are like different exercises at the gym. They train completely different mental muscles. And understanding this is the key to finding a practice that's actually going to work for you. Scientists usually break down the focus of meditation into 2 main types. The first is interoception. That's just a fancy word for directing your attention inward, feeling your breath, your heartbeat, doing a body scan. You're basically training your awareness of your own internal world. And the opposite is exteroception, which is directing your attention outward, focusing on sounds in the room, the feeling of the chair you're sitting on. You're training your awareness of your environment. So what can you actually do with this? Well, here's a really practical approach. First, just take a moment to notice your own default setting. Are you the kind of person who's always lost in their own head, stuck in thoughts? Or are you someone who's easily distracted by every little thing happening around you? Once you know your tendency, you can intentionally practice the opposite. If you live in your head, try a meditation that's all about outside sounds. If the world easily pulls your focus, practice bringing it back again and again to your breath. The whole idea is to train the mental circuits you use less often to build a more balanced, flexible mind. Now, with all of this exciting research, it is really easy to get carried away. But it's so important that we keep our scientist hats on here and take a sober look at what the biggest, most rigorous studies have to say about all this. So when researchers do what's called a meta-analysis, where they combine the results from dozens of high-quality studies, a really clear picture starts to form. Yes, the benefits of meditation for things like anxiety and depression are absolutely real. They're measurable. But the size of the effect is usually described as small to moderate. That means meditation isn't some magic pill that's going to solve everything, but it is a reliable tool that produces genuine, noticeable improvements. And all of this brings us to a landmark finding that kind of ties it all together. A famous study published in the journal Science tracked thousands of people, and they found that people were at their happiest when their minds were focused on whatever they were doing right then and there. Their conclusion was simple and powerful. A wandering mind is an unhappy mind. And when you think about it, that's the core skill that every single form of meditation is training, the ability to focus our attention. So, all this amazing scientific exploration really boils down to one fundamental skill: training our attention. The science is clear. This practice can rewire our brains and improve our lives. The only question that's left is the personal one. Knowing what you now know about how your own mind tends to work, what's the right way for you to train your focus?